Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello and welcome back to the channel where you join me today to swap from one Mustang into another. Today I'm in California on the Where's Shmee US Edition tour, having driven in the Shelby GT500 to try out something a little bit different. The first fully electric Ford, the Mustang Mach-E. Both cars technically Mustangs, but of course very, very different. Now I for one am particularly intrigued to experience what the Mach-E is all about. We're going to take a good look around it before taking it out for a drive to get a feel for what it's about and whether perhaps in the future one of these or even the GT version that's to come soon could join the Shmee-mobiles with the GT500, the Ford GT and the Focus RS. These are two very different cars but share some interesting similarities which we'll take a look at in just a moment before going out in this, which is the extended range E all-wheel drive version, to see what the Mach-E is all about. This is actually the first time I've ever even seen a Mach-E myself, so I'm very interested to learn about this today and bring you along with me to think a little bit more about it. Now this particular Mach-E is in fact the highest currently available version. It's the extended range, so with the 88 kilowatt battery of the E all-wheel drive with all of the motors, four-wheel drive, in the premium trim level, so filled with all of the specification options and costing around $56,000 US, about half the GT500. But the Grabber Lime and Rapid Red are looking incredible together. And in fact, there are quite a few things you start to notice that have actually been carried over in terms of the design of a Mustang into what is, I guess, the next generation of Mustang. Over 60 years since the famous cars of old, very much that fastback style shape. And in fact, if you come around to the side, you'll notice the extended bonnets, that coupe-like roofline. Even on the Mach-E, you'll see that upper section is actually gloss black, which disguises some of that extra height, makes it look a little bit sportier. But then when you're looking at the fronts of the cars, check out the shapes of the grills. Very much following the same lines. Around here, of course, the GT500 has a much more aggressive grille than the standard Mustang GT, but the same kind of shapes we see here on the Mach-E. Obviously closed up at the front, you don't need the same cooling coming through to a combustion engine. There is none. This is a car that is the future. This is what Ford are pitching their hopes on for the next generation of the Mustang brand. Such an iconic car for such a long period of time, now taking that forwards with this. If we come around then to look at this a bit more closely, there are so many fun details, things that, as Doug DeMuro would say, are definitely quirks about this. For example, to open the doors, you press the button here, it pops the door out, and then you grab it to pull it the rest of the way, and you'll see that pin that just tucked back in, because if the door is closed, when you've pressed this, to save you from risking trapping your fingers, you can't actually close it until you've pulled it all the way out. For the rear doors, similarly, the button back here, give that a press, it pops open. There are no door handles anywhere, you've got a bit of rubber just inside to give it a pull and open it that way, basically giving it the cleanest and smoothest possible finish on the outside, which is quite an unusual but very smart appearance in total overall. You might be wondering just about this little piece that sticks out. It's shielded by the door mirrors. When we're then inside the car, we're greeted by a number of displays. You've got the large 15.5-inch central screen with the fixed physical volume controller. Look at the graphics as well of all of this. You've got this 10-inch display here for your driving controls, and a generally well-equipped interior, which of course we will go through in detail. Now this car, being the extended range E all-wheel drive, has a total of 346 horsepower, 426 pounds-foot of torque, which is 580 newton meters. It will do 0 to 60 miles an hour in 4.8 seconds. But as I said, the GT model is going to come. The Mustang Mach-E GT Performance Edition will arrive, which will offer 480 horsepower along with 860 newton meters, 624 pounds-foot, and do the 0 to 60 mile an hour sprint in 3.5 seconds, which will clearly be something to give this a run for its money. In fact, Mustang Mach-E GT versus GT500 would be quite interesting. If we come round though towards the rear, there are some design elements back here that I'd like to talk about. We've had this iconic triple taillight design on the last generation of the Mustang, carried through here to the Mach-E, as you can see, and similarly it gives you some nice graphics, the way they illuminate and come across as you're indicating or running the blinkers. A couple of other things to touch on: the Mustang logo with this new horizontal slat style design, the futuristic electrified Mustang. I think Ford using the Mustang brand to create this car, to introduce the Mach-E, very much to reinvent and bring back and carry forward into the next generation what is their strongest brand name, their strongest I think, name, or one of the strongest names of any automotive product in the entire world. I'm going to park this up though before we head anywhere, but let me come through and just show you a little more of the interior. Even the headlights, by the way. Look at even the headlight design. The way they sit under those almost eyebrows, tucked in, pointing down, very much for purpose and giving the car a sporty look. Back here, as I said, this gloss black section, which really makes the car look sportier but still maintains the space on the inside. If we pop open the door, which you can do, by the way, either using these numbers here with Ford's pin entry, where you've got the code that you can set up to access the car. You can use your phone as the key as well. There's the Ford Pass app, which controls all of that. You can have the physical key, as I have here as well, but I'll be able to show you some of the functionality through the phone in a moment. I just find it particularly intriguing how that actually works. If I do this very quickly, you can see how that tucks back in and prevents you from trapping fingers. If we step inside here though, Bang & Olufsen sound system and this large central tablet, and in fact, let me just press the button to effectively wake it up. We've got a number of different driving modes. We've got about 300 miles of range from a full charge, but inside here, one of the things I really like is having the physical volume toggle. It's a small detail. They've bonded that to the screen. It works effectively using a touch on the back to rotate the display, to set it up. We've got the same toggle as in the GT500 to put the car into gear, electric, so single forwards gear. But outside of that, we'll go through all of this a little bit later, following on, I think, in many ways from the style we're seeing across the board. Tesla basically introducing it, Mercedes now with the S-Class having large central screens as well. But thankfully, with this, with your driver information on the dashboard display in front of you, which I certainly, for one, think is very helpful. I always miss that when I'm driving a car where you're forced to look over towards the screen in the very center. So this is an interesting proposition. It is a very different interior to that found in the GT500, but it is a car that I have no doubt is going to be quite interesting to drive. So let me get set and we'll head out onto the roads and go see what it's all about. Okay then, here we go. Currently driving with the one pedal driving mode enabled. So all you do is lift off the throttle, it regenerates the power to the battery like you're pressing the brake without actually pressing the brake, which you can do in Teslas and some other EVs as well. It's a very strange sensation. It takes a bit of time to get familiar with that, but when you are familiar with it, from my experience and the experience I've heard from others, you basically don't really want to live without it again. Obviously EV, that almost silent driving away, and we're in, I think, the normal default driving mode. We have a few different driving modes that you can select through the screen when this loads up. A small bit of lag, I noticed, waiting for this to bring up the different modes. We've got Engage, Whisper, Unbridled, playing with the horse theme of the Mustang. I think over in Europe it's actually called Untamed instead of Unbridled. But initially, so we go past the Goodyear blimp I just noticed alongside me taking off, which is really quite cool. Anyway, gotta get used to this. When you lift off, it does brake very, very, very firmly. That immediate kind of pull back, which takes your body a little bit of adjustment to get used to. What I'm hoping though, as we start to get flowing with this a little bit more, is unlike, we could say, the Teslas, it feels more like a car. And it's what I love about my Taycan so much, is that it feels like a Porsche. It doesn't feel like this weird thing that has no appeal to a driving enthusiast or to a petrol head. Whereas I know with this, and certainly with the GT variant that's coming in the GT Performance Edition, that is much, much higher on the overall agenda. Now, you do notice it's quite a heavy thing going over some of the bumps. You can feel the way the thing is shaking around a little bit. Obviously, like all cars loaded with batteries, trying to keep the weight as low as possible, which does mean very flat around the corners, but it does unfortunately mean a little bit bumpy when you're driving slowly. So let's put it into Whisper mode. Things change a little bit. So this is quieter, normal. We were in Unbridled before. This is your, I guess, normal eco mode, we could say. Engage is your regular. Yeah, you feel that difference in the throttle pedal as soon as I put it into Engage. Things got a little bit more lively, obviously still with the brake regen, but it's quiet. I've got the aircon blowing because we're in a nice warm California. I was going to find where to go and get myself a little bit lost on the streets. Very responsive with the torque as soon as you do anything with the throttle pedal, and brings it down to a stop. There's a small little whir in the background that you can hear. There is the propulsion sound, which is currently enabled, so you can actually turn that off, similarly to how the Taycan does it as well. Otherwise, it just feels, I guess, like a nice SUV. Not the most premium SUV in the world, but certainly more premium than
the Model Y, on which this is effectively in the same segment. Pull around the corner here, I'll just accelerate a little bit, and yeah, even this, which is not the fast one, I mean, it's fast enough, it's 350 odd horsepower, is plenty quick. And that's one of the things I think we lose a little bit of track on, is that, or I certainly lose a little bit of track on, is that this is a lot of power for normal use. And if we go back into Unbridled, that name is just funny, lots and lots, yeah, wow. I mean, you don't get that through the video, I know. You could possibly hear this rumble type noise it makes. That's quite unusual. That's actually really quite unusual. One thing I know I do, which I always find quite funny, is when I get in an electric car, because the ambience is so quiet, it just makes you want to talk more softly. It's a strange side effect. It's exactly the same when you drive in a Rolls Royce. Just that refinement that comes from being in an EV. Yes, you can hear more of the other noises cars make. In this case, I can't hear any rattles or squeaks or funny sounds at all at the moment. But it's just this luxury feeling that comes from silence, and I'm enjoying it so much in the Taycan. Since buying the Taycan, my first electric car, I've learned a little bit about how you can use them and the benefits of them. Yes, there are circumstances and situations where they don't work. Really long drives, or if you don't have access to a charger on a convenient basis, or if you want the emotion of a combustion engine. But there are also things that they do incredibly well, which are, for example, this softness of the ride, the ease of not having to go to a gas station if you can charge it every night, unless you're driving more than, in the case of this, 300 or so miles. Well, 300 miles if it's the rear-wheel drive, 270 miles if it's the all-wheel drive. You get a little bit less if you don't have the extended range. So you'd have 211 for the all-wheel drive, and I think 230 for the rear-wheel drive. So that is actually a benefit, but it just feels pleasant to live with. And you have to remember as well, these cars will have the fully autonomous capabilities. Yes, not completely enabled at the moment, but it's obviously there in terms of the sensors and the systems and what the car knows and what it shows you. And the convenience factor is through the roof. For daily driving, for me, for example, going from my home to my garage in the near future when the garage is up and running, this is the best way to do it, because it's a short little journey in the city centre, avoid some of the taxes and charges that we have in the UK, which I guess here in California are going to come in soon as well, and probably then propagate out around from there. But live with it, go, short journey, plug it in while you're there, it's fully charged again to go home. It's not good to keep them on 100% when it's an EV. And talking of this, obviously while I'm out here, my Taycan is in the UK, where I haven't actually touched it at this point for the best part of 3 months. Now, a friend has been going to check it out, and it is surviving and not losing as much power as I thought it would. In fact, it was only losing a couple of % a month when we were keeping tabs of it before, so really quite impressive overall. This is just, for me, it's very familiar. All the Ford feel, the Mustang feel, you know, the horse that you have sitting on the airbag, to all of the controls and the stalks and the windows and mirrors, slightly changed from my car, ever so slightly different, but just nice, unique styling and finish that's been created for this. I really appreciate having the separate display. I'm not the biggest fan of the EVs that don't have the dedicated display for the driver. I don't like having to look off towards the center for it, and this shows you, you know, your lane and adaptive sensor to what's going on in front of you and everything on that side that you'd probably expect it to do as well. There's also this additional panel below which actually has sensors to detect that you're looking at the road, not drowsing off. So in the future, when the car is driving autonomously, making sure that you're aware of what you're doing. Yeah, I've already kind of got used to the one touch or the one pedal driving style. If I turn that off, I think we then, yeah, then we have, when you start driving, you have creep, so you then need to be more proactive with the brake pedal. Auto ambient light selection. I like the details that have gone into this. Ford have clearly worked very hard, knowing that this was going to be a really important product for the brand going forwards. Obviously, there's this big catch-up process now that so many of the traditional automotive manufacturers are playing to catch up with Tesla and the other EV companies who have that head start now because they got up and running. So doing things in a different way is certainly a challenge. To do things in an exciting way and not just look like something really boring, to create some emotion around the product. And that is clearly why they've pulled the Mustang badge into this. To me, it's the Mach-E, the Mach-E as opposed to a Mustang that's electric. And I'm sure that is probably the same for many of you guys, but you can see why they've done it, and you can see where it goes, and so far it's a very pleasant car. Honestly, I feel more comfortable in here than I did in the Model Y, which to me just felt a bit strange. I do feel that similarly to a lot of cars these days, in Unbridled, the steering seems to get artificially too heavy when you turn it up. Electric steering, it's just the way these things go. And I'd like it to be a little bit more connected, but obviously this is just driving through town, which is where most of these cars will obviously spend their miles, as opposed to being blasted down mountain roads. Although it would have been amazing to get it outside of LA. It just takes a little bit long, as you possibly know about this city. Probably like an hour and a half to even get to somewhere nice from where I am at the moment. Going out on the highway, yeah, that's where the acceleration comes in. Unfortunately, looking a touch too busy to really be able to enjoy some of that EV style acceleration, he says. Big truck just over my shoulders. Let's pull it out then. Foot down. There we go. You can hear that strange noise from it too. We've got lots of assistance controls. For example, we have the lane keeping system. You can turn that on or off. We have the adaptive cruise control in effect. We can turn this on, set it, push that up, enable it, there we go. Let the car take over, let the car do its thing. You can feel the steering wheel already moving around. And these kind of things just make your drive that touch more pleasant. I often talk about this because if you have a steering wheel that's guiding you through the lanes on a long journey, you just feel more relaxed because you haven't been tugging at it left, right and centre. The car's been doing everything for you and making your life spectacularly easy. And that's one of the directions we're heading. You know, we are going to be heading towards a world with EVs, with autonomous cars, with subscription services where the car just turns up and you jump in. So things are going to change, but we're looking for, or I'm looking for, the interim stages in this. Cars that embrace some of this new technology in a way that still brings about some kind of emotional connection or some kind of reason for it. And that's where I'm immediately thinking this excels in the way that the Taycan excels. It doesn't just feel like a run-of-the-mill just because. I mean, some would say that the badge is just because, but it's different. It's just a little bit different. I like how it gives me a little bubble around of what's going on. I guess we're protected within our circle. Obviously slowing down as the truck in front pulled over, and then back on the power. Off we go again. Instant torque. That feeling of the car just effortlessly gliding away. And yeah, these things, it's never going to have the complete emotion that a car with a combustion engine has. There are no pedals I can shift up and down through gears or do it manually with a clutch and a stick. This is a case of rock and roll. Just let it do its thing in a fun way with some innovative features. You know, plenty of things that have been created and introduced for this car. What happens if I just kick it? Foot down. You really don't get a sense through video driving electric cars what they're like in performance terms. If you did that with your normal passengers beside you in a combustion engine car, they'd probably be screaming at you to slow down, to stop accelerating like that. But on a video, you can't even tell that I've even started to accelerate. It's just exactly the same as it was right before, which I always find a little bit frustrating and, you know, kind of a shame that you don't get that. You don't get that through the video because it doesn't give a true sense of what the vehicle is actually like to use. And that's disconnect, isn't it? It's just a disconnect. Now, I've been driving this car on the same kind of loop and roads that I drove the Model Y in Miami just before the start of the Where's Shmee US Edition tour. So I've got a very, I guess, back-to-back comparison experience between the two of them in the same kind of conditions. And there is no doubt that this is the one of these two that I would buy. This car over a Model Y. It just feels, it's so much more what I like. It's not trying to be, how do I describe this? It doesn't feel like it's trying to take over everything in one place. It's very, Tesla is like Apple, and this is like Android. This is a great, more open, more friendly approach, I would say, rather than getting sucked into this ecosystem. And it's just a car that would fit, I think, quite well even with the cars in my garage, considering the lineup of Fords that I seem to be growing on a pretty endless basis at the moment. I need to have more of a play, though, with all of the different software and systems and things that we have in here. I just quite enjoy driving it. Back into Unbridled. Back with the foot down. It's great. It's just an all-round great thing, you know. And the more time I spend in EVs, the more sense they seem to make. The more I gel and connect with them, and the more I've started myself to live with and appreciate. Obviously, one of the big discussions comes down to charging networks, and as I've talked about in my Taycan videos, this is different everywhere. Every country, every state in the US, Tesla versus, we could say, non-Tesla in terms of different infrastructures. It's a very, very, very tricky one to directly compare, because all of you guys would have different experiences than I would have, depending where I am with it. So we go back over a pretty chopped up road, and this, like I said, is where you feel the weight over the bumps. But from my, you know, if you're using a car for going about daily commutes, not going to run it down to zero ever in a realistic single day drive, or even if you are, you have access to an easy charger along the route, EV does make so much sense. While they might not be as, you know, while there are all of these discussions, I should say, about whether they are as economical to build an EV, they do obviously move pollution out of city centres. This goes backwards and forwards. I'm not going to get fully into that right now, but, you know, this drives decently.
I had said that there was a lot to go through with this car, and there really and truly is, from the software and the infotainment to using the phone and the controls through that, to also taking a look at the seats in the back and the storage area, as well as this lovely glass panoramic roof. But a fun thing just before we go through that, I've just coincidentally pulled into a parking lot, which I've realised as soon as I've got here is the exact same place that I came about 7 years ago with a Lexus LFA. Completely coincidentally, that was a crazy day. Anyway, here with the Mach-E right now to go through some more of the controls and various things that are around in terms of what we're looking at, in terms of the feel. Obviously with the dashboard, you've got these different materials. You've got the horizontal air conditioning vents currently running nice and cool because it's rather warm outside. You've got the contrast stitch. Materials aren't exactly the most luxurious in the world, but significantly nicer than some other cars that I've experienced at this kind of price point. The seats, you've got the perforations, very supportive, very comfortable, not the sportiest. Maybe for the GT there'll be some more side bolstering, but very pleasant for the kind of drive that I've just been doing. Beneath this 15.5-inch screen, which we'll go through in more detail in a moment, including its toggle control, you've got this storage pad with the wireless charging for the phone. That's set up for this car at the moment. You've got some cup holders down here. You've also got two USB ports, including USB-C tucked in that way. You've got the mechanical selector for the park reverse neutral drive, effectively the gearbox control, and L. If you have it in drive and you press L, that is effectively low, which uses the maximum engine braking, the maximum regeneration of the power, and obviously one pedal driving will brake you even harder, not intended for extensive use. Then we've got parking hazards and the electric park brake sitting just in front of the armrest here, which opens upwards. You've then got a storage cubby underneath here, which is actually quite a large area. There's also the 12-volt socket down here too. A few other bits and pieces going on in there. In terms of the driving controls, there aren't too many. You've obviously got your traditional stalks for your lights and for your wipers. On the steering wheel itself, you've got your adaptive cruise control, and then you've got some of your media controls over towards the other side. Towards the left, you've got lock and unlock. You've got 1, 2, 3 for your seat positions. You've got your mirror controls, your window controls, and then the kind of funky door release. You actually pull it towards you and it pops the door open and opens it up. You've got the B&O speaker here as well, Mustang kick plates. You've got your lumbar control and a little bit of seat adjustment and movement for the base and for the backrest tucked in down here as well. Inside, it's very quiet. Insulation is great through the windows. You can't adjust this panoramic roof. You don't have electrochromic functionality or anything like that, but it's nicely tinted while still giving you a good feel for what's going on of the world above you. And having a large piece of glass like that just makes a car feel so roomy and airy. It's always a very, very nice thing. Up here we've got some light controls. We've got the garage home link for your garage door controls as well. All, like I said, part of a very high specification that this car comes with to begin with. On the dashboard, it's pretty simple dashboard, I say, but the display that you have here, the 10-inch very wide display, you've got your estimated range to empty. You can see we've used 5% of the power so far, and this central graphic shows you various different things depending what's going on. Compass direction, 1 foot, driving mode, ready. If we were to put it into drive, you can see on the right hand side that the toggles will change. If we press the button and turn it off, that shuts away with a nice little graphic as well. Funny sounds that it makes, but not too intrusive. We press that again, turn it back on. I think it's just chiming because I don't have my seatbelt on at the moment while I'm sat here in the car park. Here then, in the main screen, you obviously have your main controls where you can go through everything you might want to, Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, and then all of the built-in bits and pieces. You can go into the car settings, which is where we have our driving modes, the camera, you've got the 360 camera, you've also got parking assist, you can change the different screens and views and set it up depending exactly what you'd like to be looking at. You've then got the automated parking, which helps you with the active park assist, parallel park, or whatever it may be. A couple of other things, driver assistance here, auto hold, traction control, we'll keep that on. Of course, driving out on the roads, you've got the valet mode as well, and then you can go into settings, and there's always a lot of things. The more cars become based on technology and electronics, the more options and things you can change and configure, and you can see this is a fairly extensive list of vehicle settings, general settings, and every other kind of setting, which I always like, because when you pick up a new car you can spend forever going through and playing with all of this. And down at the bottom here you've got your seat heating controls, you've got your climate, but you also have this physical toggle, and it's such a small thing, but to control music, if you're trying to tap on a screen or deal with things, it can be difficult. And I find tablets and screens in general a little bit stressful because they're much harder to use when your eyes are there than a traditional interface with buttons to press. I get that they give you much more control and it's a cleaner visual appearance. Tesla obviously led the way with that when they launched the Model S, well, quite a while ago now. But even just having this controller that's bonded onto the screen and effectively is running something that's touching the screen behind it to make it work all in configuration with the software of it, it's just a nice touch. Just a nice touch. It does feel a little bit plasticky, but I guess it has to be made like this to attach onto the screen in the way that it does. Now, if I step on out, door handle, let's go have a look at some of the other elements. Oh, it's very windy here. Before we come back to experiment with this phone, I'm just going to grab it so that I can show you some of the things we can do with that. In the rear of the car, we have a button here to pop open the doors. Inside, decent amount of space, mostly because of this gloss black section up top that disappears, gives you that fastback effect of the 1960s Mustangs. But stepping in here, you do need to watch out for this. It is a low entry line with the door that even I am nearly banging my head on, and I'm not all that tall, about 5'10" and a half or so. But when you're sat in here, you've got a lot more room than you would think when you're looking at the car from the outside. It feels much more spacious inside than I guess it looks to begin with. Now, one thing I do quite like, and I'm going to step out actually to show you this, just ducking under the door line there, is how the doors themselves overlap the outside of the car. You can see that there at the rear, same up front, obviously now getting covered in fingerprints as I open and close it, which means that you don't have a wide sill to step over, and you also keep, or you won't get your trousers dirty, for example, your pants dirty out here if you step out over a car that you've been driving off-road or doing something interesting with, which just makes things a little bit cleaner. And also having that gloss black makes the car look sportier around there as well. To the rear, if we just press the button down here, power fold tailgate, that opens up, decent amount of space back here, and of course the folding rear seats. We've got the cover in place at the moment, you can pop that off should you wish. Underneath here, got a little bit of extra space, currently with the tyre inflator, as opposed to anything too crazy, but basically giving you a fairly flat rear loading deck. But obviously, as you can see, coupe shape, you do take away some space as a result. The price to pay for it looking that extra touch cooler, we could say. Anyway, this is where, if you have left the car, you know, I'm going to lock it for the moment with the key, the traditional key, make sure we've got that one, not the Shelby GT500 one. This is where the phone comes into play. For this car then, we've got the app here, which is connected to it already. You can start it and you can do various bits and pieces. So for example, if I hold the Windows down button on the app, yes, I'm putting down the windows of the car from the app control. Obviously you can put those back up, and it's quite funky what they do when they're going back up. You'll see as they get towards the top, they actually slow down, just to softly close to the very top. Then you can open up the trunk, and it's moderately bizarre that you can do all of these things from factory with the app that you find on the phone. I apologize that it's very, very windy here at the moment. I think if I press this, I can hopefully close the trunk back down again, nice and easily. You can also obviously start the car up. You can chime the horn and flash the lights, which I'm not going to do right now because that would be a bit of a jump, but the advantage of starting it, you can see the headlights have all woken up and done their thing, is obviously that you could then have the climate control running, get the car cooled down on a hot day out or whatever it might be exactly. Talking of which, I do want to show you a little bit of what the light sequence actually does. So it's just come through here, got that number pad for the car itself, got everything waking up just at the moment, so it's not currently turned on. I did manage to just turn it off with the app, which is great. What I want to show with the key is if you lock the car, you get this blink effect from the headlights, the way they swoosh out to the side, reminiscent again with this triple light style design that we're seeing through the Mustang theme. Same at the rear. When you blink these, hard to see obviously with today's lights, but you can see the way they swoosh out when you finish and have them flashing off like that. So all in all, would I buy a Mustang Mach-E? I think that's what today is kind of all about, and in many ways, yes, I think I would. I would love to try a Mach-E GT, so that might be something that joins the Shmee mobiles down the line, perhaps in addition to the Taycan Turbo S, perhaps not, I don't entirely know at this stage. When I've got my space, the Shmuseum, and I've got the ability to keep an electric car charged up. Talking about charging up, you do have the charging port on the driver's side up here with the car unlocked. Just give this a push, it opens up. Obviously slightly different chargers depending where in the world you might be, but with the double connection at the bottom for 150 kilowatt charging, and then the release button just sitting alongside that. Yes, this isn't the same category or class as the Taycan. It's about a quarter of the price, and the GT will presumably still be a third or a half of the price, but it's a car that's a very different approach for Ford, and one that I think they've held back from going straight into it, and they've done it in a very unique way. And I quite like the Mustang branding. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's different, it's unusual, and this would be quite nice. Imagine if I went crazy and got a Raptor, or the potentially upcoming Raptor R with the same engine as the GT500, as the rumours suggest at the moment. The GT, the Heritage RS, the GT500, the EV, the Daily. It's amazing that one company satisfies every kind of automotive desire, all under the same level of familiarity. For today though, that is all. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed learning with me about the Ford Mustang Mach-E, driving this car today. That's it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.